So when you think about global trade, we always picture these massive container ships. But what we don't see is the unseen infrastructure that makes it all possible. We're talking about keeping the waterways, the channels themselves, deep and navigable. And that industry, dredging, is what's huge, a multi-billion-dollar business. And in India right now, it's undergoing this incredible transformation. It's not just maintenance anymore. It's becoming a core part of the national economic plan.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Today, we're doing a deep dive based on a pretty detailed institutional research report from December of 2025. We're looking specifically at a company called Knowledge Marine and Engineering Works, or KMEW. And our goal really is to unpack these huge macro tailwinds that are just pushing India's maritime sector forward and see how this one company, KMEW, is set up to ride that wave, especially with these big government plans like Maritime India Vision 2030 and the Amrit Kaal 2047 vision.
And when you say huge tailwinds or seismic shifts, we're not just talking about a little bump in annual growth here. I think we have to start with the sheer scale of what's already happened because it really sets the stage for everything else.
Exactly. You cannot overstate the foundational growth. I mean, we are looking at a truly exponential rise in cargo movement on India's national waterways. So back in, FY 13-14, the total volume was just 18 million metric tons.
18, okay.
Just 18. Now, you fast forward to this financial year, FY 24-25, and that number has just exploded to 145.5 million metric tons.
Wow. That's, what, an 8-fold increase. And in just over a decade, that kind of growth, that 20% compound annual growth rate, it's outpacing almost everything else. This feels less like organic growth and more like a deliberate strategic shift.
It is. It's 100% strategic. And if you unpack the logic, it really comes down to this sort of a triple threat advantage. It's all about cost, carbon, and congestion.
Okay, let's start with the money, the economic argument. How big of a deal is the cost efficiency here? What's the real difference between using water versus, say, rail or road?
It's the difference between a viable business and, just scraping by. If you look at the research, moving 1 ton of freight over 1 kilometer, by highway, it costs about 2.28 rupees. By rail, it's cheaper, around 1.41 rupees. But then you move that same ton onto an inland waterway, and the cost just plummets. It drops to only 1.19 rupees.
That's not just a small saving. For companies moving millions of tons, that difference is fundamental. It basically guarantees long-term demand for whoever is keeping those waterways open.
Absolutely. The government isn't just pushing this with incentives. It's pushing it because it's just a smarter, cheaper way to move bulk goods. And that's before you even get to the environmental case, which just makes it even stronger.
And we know that environmental angle is a huge part of all new infrastructure planning in India now. How do the numbers stack up there?
Oh, it's a night and day difference. I mean, inland water transport is just so much greener. The fuel efficiency comparison is stark. With 1 liter of fuel, you can move 24 tons by road. With that same liter, you can move 85 tons by rail. But by water, you can move an incredible 105 tons.
105, it's not even close.
Not even close. And that kind of energy saving lines up perfectly with the country's big long-term sustainability goals.
And these aren't just goals, right? They're baked into these huge generational plans like the Maritime Amrit Kaal Vision 2047.
It's a massive, decades-long infrastructure play. They're targeting over 500 million metric tons of traffic on these waterways by 2047. That's a huge leap from where we are now, 145. And to get there, they've committed something like INR 80 lakh crore for overall maritime growth. Plus, it's not just about more traffic, it's about better traffic. They want 100% of all tugboats in major ports to be green tugs by 2047.
So you're essentially locking in decades of guaranteed demand. The question then isn't if the work will be there, but who is going to be able to do it? Which brings us right back to KMEW and where they fit in all this.
Right. So KMEW, they present themselves as this integrated player. They do shipbuilding, other services, and of course, dredging. But let's be clear, dredging is the core. It makes up about 90% of their revenue for FY25. They are at heart a waterway maintenance specialist.
But dredging, especially the big projects, that's usually dominated by these huge European giants, right? The Ondanils, the Boskalises of the world. How does a smaller domestic company even compete?
That's the key to their whole strategy. It's built on a really strong moat, high entry barriers, and specialization in areas those giants tend to ignore. The Indian dredging market has these incredibly tough pre-qualification rules. You need a long track record, certain revenue levels. Most new companies can't even get in the door. So there's very little competition for the really complex stuff.
So it's not just about having the boats. It's about having the resume, the documented proof that you can actually get the job done.
Precisely. KMEW has more than 20 years of experience, all this accumulated seabed data. And that knowledge, that expertise, lets them bid on their own for big projects. We're talking projects over 3 billion rupees. They don't need to find an international partner, and that is a huge competitive edge.
And they lean into that complexity. The report mentions some really specialized work, like rock dredging.
Yeah, rock dredging is a great example. It's very profitable, but it's also technically really difficult. If you bring the wrong kind of ship, one designed for silt, to a rock job, you'll lose a fortune. KMEW just won a big rock dredging contract at the JNPA port worth nearly 584 million rupees. It involves controlled blasting, precision drilling. It's not simple work.
It sounds like they're deliberately carving out a niche where they know most competitors can't or won't follow.
That is their strategic sweet spot. So you have the four global giants who control, say, 70 or 80% of the really big capital dredging, building new ports from scratch. But they don't typically bother with the routine maintenance dredging or the work in shallow draft waters. And that segment where KMUW lives is still a $5 billion market in India. The giants are chasing bigger fish, which leaves KMEW to really dominate this critical domestic space.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So they've got this protected niche in a market that the government is forcing to grow. But let's connect the dots on their other businesses. How do things like green tugs and tourism fit with their core dredging work? Is it an integrated plan?
It's a very integrated strategy. It's all about leveraging their core marine expertise to capture these new government-led opportunities. The Inland Waterways push, for example, gives them immediate dredging work. Specifically, the Jalmarg Vikas project on National Waterway 1, the Ganga River system.
And what's their role there?
They've secured 3 big tenders on NW1, totaling about 2.7 billion rupees. And that covers 365 kilometers of the project. So they basically have a 26% market share of this massive central development project that's guaranteed work for years.
So that's the long-term dredging revenue locked in. But the part that seems truly different is this Green Tug Transition Program, the GTTP. This sounds less like a one-off contract and more like a long-term annuity.
It is the very definition of a stable long-term annuity.
Yeah.
The GTTP is this huge national initiative to get 50 green tugs in the water by 2030. Phase 1, which is happening now, is for 16 tugs, and the total investment is just massive, maybe 100 to 120 billion rupees.
And KMEW managed to get a big piece of that first phase, right? Putting them at the front of this whole tech shift.
They did. They won 2 of the first 6 tenders for Phase 1. One for the VO Chidambaran port and another for Visakhapatnam port. That's about 6.5 billion rupees in order inflow. But here's the crucial part. It's not about the upfront money. It's a 15-year charter hire agreement. They build the tug, they maintain it, and the port pays them a predictable fee every month for 15 years.
That completely changes their revenue profile. It goes from lumpy project work to something more like a utility.
Exactly. The long-term visibility is incredible. And they're not just staying in India, they've also been building out an international business.
Right. The report mentioned repeat work in Myanmar, which is about 18% of their revenue.
Yeah.
But the really interesting idea was this waste-to-wealth model in Bahrain.
That is a fascinating strategic pivot. So normally with dredging, you dig up sand and silt, and then you have to pay to dump it somewhere. KMEW turned that completely on its head. They started treating the dredged material as a valuable resource.
So instead of a cost for disposal, they created a new revenue stream by selling the sand to local construction companies.
Higher margins, much better economics. That Bahrain deal gave them about 4.5 billion rupees of visibility over 5 years. Now, that specific vessel is back working in India because demand is so high here, but the model is proven. It's a playbook they can use again.
And they're even touching the consumer space with that maritime tourism project.
Yes, the Narmada Voyage Cruise. They're building and operating a luxury cruise ship, and that provides revenue visibility of up to 8 billion rupees over 20 years. So you see the pattern. Dredging, tugs, tourism. It's all backed by long-term government contracts, and it all leverages their core expertise in running marine assets.
So given this really strong position, how do they compare against the big state-owned player, the Dredging Corporation of India, or DCI? That must be a major competitive friction point.
It's a huge dynamic, and frankly, DCI's problems have become KMEW's biggest opportunity. DCI is struggling with a very old fleet. We're talking an average vessel age of over 23 years.
So DCI is basically running a fleet where everything needs constant expensive repairs, which leads to breakdowns and delays.
That's a perfect way to put it. That age leads to constant operational problems, downtime, and big performance failures. For instance, DCI got hit with 1.18 billion rupees in damages just for maintenance failures at one port, New Mangalore. That kind of hit forces you to get help.
And KMEW is the company they have to call.
Exactly. Because DCI can't handle the workload, they have to subcontract a huge amount of it out. And KMUW's order inflow from DCI went from literally zero in FY23 to about 1 billion rupees in FY25. They're just absorbing all the work the incumbent can no longer do.
Okay, so let's get to the final piece of this puzzle, which is the tonnage tax. Because this feels like more than just a policy change. It seems like a financial rocket booster for their whole expansion plan.
It is a total game changer for any company in this space.
Yeah.
So the tonnage tax scheme, or TTS, was extended to inland vessels in February of 2025. And it completely changes the economics of the business. Normally, you pay tax on your profits, right? TTS works differently.
Right, so explain how it works. What's the mechanism?
Think of it like this. Instead of taxing the profit you make from your factory, you're taxed on the size of the factory floor itself. TTS taxes the business income based on the vessel's gross tonnage, not on the actual profit you make. For a high-margin, capital-heavy business, it's a huge, predictable benefit.
And the impact on KMEW's bottom line is pretty dramatic.
It's huge. It slashes their tax outgo. The report projects that their effective tax rate on profits will drop down to around 4.7% by FY28. That just creates so much more cash flow and profitability.
But there's a catch, isn't there? They can't just pocket that tax saving. They have to reinvest it.
Precisely. That's the strategic part. The TTS benefit has to be used for capital expenditure over the next 8 years, which lines up perfectly with KMEW's massive CapEx plans. They've already got about 7.5 billion rupees earmarked for new ships between FY26 and FY28. And the tonnage tax basically gives them the financial cushion to go out and do it.
So you have the macro tailwinds, you have the competitive advantages against a weakening incumbent, and you have this powerful financial catalyst. It all adds up to some incredibly aggressive growth projections in the report.
They are aggressive, no doubt, but they're backed by the order book and this CapEx plan. The report is forecasting compound annual growth rates of 58% for revenue, 62% for EBITDA, and 71% for profit after tax over that FY25 to 28 period.
A 71% PD growth is a number that makes you sit up straight. What are the bottlenecks here? Are they sacrificing their return ratios just for the sake of growth?
That's the critical question. And yes, in the short term, the heavy CapEx does depress the return ratios. That's normal when you're buying a lot of new assets. But the report projects a strong recovery. They see return on equity getting back to 29.5% and return on capital employed at 24.3% by FY28. The real risk, the bottleneck, is just execution. Can they get these new ships built and working on time?
Okay, so what does it all mean? We've gone through the incredible government support, the financial tailwinds, but any real deep dive has to look at the risks too. We have to acknowledge the caveats that come with these kinds of forecasts.
The risks are absolutely structural. This is a tough, execution-heavy, capital-intensive business. The research points to a few key things. First, there's concentration risk. A huge portion of their revenue comes from a very small number of government clients and port authorities.
So if their revenue is so tied to government bodies, are they vulnerable to political changes, or is it more about these long-term contracts?
It's mostly insulated by the long-term tenders, but a major policy U-turn could definitely have an impact. Second, you're always exposed to things you can't control, like the weather. Monsoons can just shut down marine operations, which means project delays and revenue delays.
And that ties into the third point from the research, which is that management's timelines haven't always been perfect.
That is noted in the report. Their guidance has sometimes missed the mark on timelines, but the key thing is that the business, the order itself, almost always comes through. It might be delayed by 6 or 12 months, so it's more a question of when the revenue is recognized, not if. But it's definitely something to watch.
This has been a really fascinating look at a critical but often hidden part of the economy. If we zoom out for a final thought, India's big maritime Amrit Kaal vision is all about achieving self-reliance, right? This idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Indeed. And you have KMEW's management team, which has deep expertise in naval architecture. They've already proven they can bid on and win these complex, specialized projects on their own. They're already building these high-tech green tugs.
So that raises a provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. Given that the government is looking for reliable, high-tech domestic partners, what if the biggest opportunity for a company like KMEW isn't just in maintenance dredging or even in running a cruise ship? What if the real future, the real prize, is to leverage that in-house technical skill and all that tonnage tax-funded capex to become the builder of the next generation of complex, specialized vessels, the entire fleet for India and maybe even for the world. It's a compelling thought for a company that started out just cleaning riverbeds.